He hit the dog every time it barked. He yelled when it wagged its tail. And still the dog stayed. Day after day, in rain, in snow, the beatings never stopped. Until one morning, 2 years after the last blow, the dog returned. Not for revenge, but for something far more powerful. And what happened next, no one, not even the man who used to hit him, could ever forget. This is the story of a dog who endured the worst humanity had to offer, yet somehow found the strength to give it something back: grace. It's a story about pain, survival, and an ending that shook even the coldest heart. If you've ever questioned whether animals feel love, or whether they remember who hurt them, you won't after hearing this. The old house sat at the edge of a forgotten road, its broken fence leaning like it was tired of standing. In the backyard, half sunken in mud, stood a rusted chain. It was still attached to the same post where the dog had been tied for nearly 3 years. There were no toys, no shelter, just a dented metal bowl that only sometimes held water. The dog's name was Buddy. Not that he ever heard it kindly. The man who named him, Earl, never used it with affection. Earl called it out only when he was drunk or angry, which was most of the time. Every time Buddy barked, Earl shouted. When he whined, Earl cursed. And when Buddy wagged his tail in hopes of a kind word, he was met with a boot or belt. No one in the neighborhood liked Earl. But out here, where houses were spaced apart by empty fields and broken dreams, nobody intervened. They heard the barking. They saw the bruises, but they looked away. Buddy's life was a cycle of pain and waiting. He waited for food. He waited for scraps of kindness. And most painfully, he waited for Earl to change. But Earl didn't. He only got worse. Some days, Earl wouldn't even come outside. He'd toss the bowl from the back door and slam it shut. When Buddy dragged the chain to reach it, he'd choke himself. And when he whined from hunger, Earl would storm out and slap him silent. But Buddy didn't run away. He couldn't. The chain wouldn't let him. Until one stormy night, it broke. Lightning cracked through the sky like a whip. The wind roared against the old house, and Buddy huddled beneath a rotting wooden pallet for shelter. His chain, rusted from years of neglect, had been weakening, and tonight it finally snapped. Buddy stood still at first, stunned. He looked around. No one came. The house was dark. Then, for the first time since he was a puppy, Buddy ran. He ran through the field, through the wire fence, past the barn, past the orchard, past the place where he'd once chased butterflies before the chain. He didn't look back. By morning, Buddy was nowhere near the house. Earl didn't even notice until the next afternoon. He stumbled out with his coffee-stained shirt and beer in hand. "Buddy!" he yelled. No barking, no rattle of chain, no tail. "Damn mutt!" he growled, but something in his voice cracked. He wandered around the backyard, scratching his head. The chain lay in the mud, snapped clean near the post. For the first time in years, there was silence. What happened next no one expected. Buddy was spotted by a woman named Marla, a school teacher who lived on the other side of town. She saw him near the riverbank, shivering, trying to drink from the edge. His ribs showed. His ears were torn. But his eyes, they were still soft. Marla didn't hesitate. She wrapped him in her coat, loaded him into her old station wagon, and took him home. For the first time in his life, Buddy slept indoors. For the first time in years, he felt a gentle touch. For the first time, he wagged his tail and someone smiled. Marla named him Scout, a new name for a new life. She fed him gently, little by little. She bandaged his wounds. She took him to a vet, where they discovered old injuries. Fractured ribs, healed breaks, scars that told stories Scout couldn't. "He's been through hell," the vet said, "but he's got a strong heart." And he did. Scout learned to trust again. He followed Marla around like a shadow. He waited at the door every day when she left for school. He slept at her feet. And when she cried, after losing her father that winter, Scout licked her tears away like he understood. Because maybe he did. But 2 years later, something happened. Marla came home from work with a strange look on her face. "Scout," she said softly. "You won't believe this." She had seen something at the grocery store bulletin board. A flyer. Someone was looking for a dog. And that someone was Earl. It read, "Lost dog. Male. Brown short hair. Name Buddy. Been gone 2 years. Reward offered. Please call." Scout's ears perked up when she read the name. Buddy. Marla felt a chill crawl up her spine. Why now? Why after 2 years? She crumpled the flyer and tossed it. But Scout stared at the trash can for hours. That night, Scout didn't eat. He stood by the window. He didn't bark. Didn't whine. He just waited. And the next morning, he was gone. Marla searched everywhere. Posters. Shelters. Calls to neighbors. But no sign. Meanwhile, miles away, Earl sat on his porch with a cigarette and a beer, watching the sunset. His life had fallen apart. The woman he lived with had left. His job at the mill was gone. The house was quieter than ever. And that's when he saw something. A shape trotting up the old road. Thin but stronger. Dirty paws. Gentle eyes. It was Buddy. At first, Earl stood frozen. Then he laughed bitterly. "You came back, you stupid mutt?" But Buddy didn't bark. He didn't growl. He just sat and stared. His eyes were calm. Not afraid. Not angry. Just present. Earl stepped closer. "What do you want?" Buddy slowly wagged his tail. Then he walked to the post where the chain used to be and sat beside it, as if to say, "I remember, but I'm not here for revenge." Earl looked down at him. His hands shook. Buddy stood up, walked closer, and gently pressed his head into Earl's leg, and then turned around and walked away. Earl didn't follow. He just watched. Tears streamed down his face, not because the dog had returned, but because he had forgiven him and left. Earl didn't move for hours. After Buddy, no Scout, had turned and walked away, something inside him broke open like a long, rusted hinge. He stood there on the porch, the cigarette burning down between his fingers, untouched, the sun falling behind the treeline. The silence was louder now than ever before. It wasn't just the absence of barking. It was the absence of something deeper, something he couldn't explain. Earl wasn't the type to cry. Life had trained that out of him. But as he stood staring down the road where the dog had vanished, tears slid down his cheeks without his permission. He wiped them away with a curse, but they kept coming. For days, he wandered the house like a ghost. The backyard still had the muddy patch where Buddy's old chain had once been. It looked even worse now, abandoned, rotten, a sad monument to the man he had been. He stopped drinking. He didn't know why. Maybe it was shame. Maybe it was the way Buddy had looked at him, with eyes that carried no hate, only truth. For the first time in his life, Earl was haunted. Not by what Buddy had done, but by what he had. In a small town just 20 miles away, Marla sat curled on her couch with tear-stained cheeks and Scout's empty collar in her hands. He was gone. No note. No sound. Just gone. She had searched everywhere. Animal control, local parks, highway patrol reports, even Facebook groups. Nothing. It was like he had vanished into thin air. "I should have known," she whispered, voice cracking. "I should have done more to protect him." But deep down, she also knew something else. Scout had made a choice. He had gone back to face something, to end something, maybe not for revenge, but for closure. She just hoped it hadn't cost him his life. Meanwhile, Buddy walked for days. The path away from Earl's place was long and empty, but he seemed to know exactly where he was going. He slept in old sheds, under porches, near playgrounds. He stayed away from people mostly, but occasionally a kind stranger would toss him a sandwich or a scrap of meat. He never stayed long. There was something calling him now, something he hadn't felt before. On the 5th day of his journey, he arrived at a small cemetery. How he found it, no one could say, but he stood at the gate, tail still, ears forward. And then he walked in, row by row, sniffing the air, stepping carefully between gravestones, until he stopped. There, under a young oak tree, was a small headstone. Fresh flowers leaned against it. Sarah McCain, 1998 to 2023. Your light lives on in the lives you touched. Buddy sat. He didn't bark. He didn't move. He just sat and stayed. Back in town, a groundskeeper named Thomas noticed the dog the next morning. He approached slowly, unsure if it was a stray. "Hey there, boy." Buddy didn't flinch, didn't growl. He just lifted his head slightly and returned the man's gaze. "You waiting on someone?" Thomas murmured. Buddy looked back at the headstone. Thomas's eyes softened. "You knew her, didn't you?" From that day on, Thomas brought him food. He left water bowls by the tree. Buddy never strayed far. Word spread. People began calling him the grave dog. Photos were posted online. The town started asking questions. And eventually, one person saw the photo that stopped her heart cold. Marla. She stared at the image on her phone. A dog sitting at a grave under an oak tree. The caption read, "Stray dog refuses to leave woman's grave. Locals say he comes back every morning." Marla enlarged the photo. Her breath caught. It was him, Scout. But who was Sarah? She grabbed her keys. It was nearly dusk when Marla arrived at the cemetery. Thomas recognized her from the local school. "You're the teacher, right?" he asked, nodding. "Yes," she replied. "That dog, he's mine." Thomas studied her for a moment, then said, "Funny, he acts like he belongs to no one, but also to everyone." He led her to the oak tree, and there he was, Scout. Marla didn't call out. She just waited. After a moment, Scout turned his head. Their eyes met. No barking, no running, just that soft gaze she remembered. She dropped to her knees. "Scout! Oh my God!" He trotted toward her, slow and deliberate, then leaned his body into her like he had the first day they met. She wept, but even as he nuzzled into her shoulder, he kept glancing back at the grave. That's when she knew this place mattered to him. She stood and looked at the name on the stone. Sarah McCain. The name was familiar. Marla pulled out her phone and searched. A few minutes later, she found it. Sarah had once worked at the vet's office, the same one that had treated Scout after she rescued him. Sarah had been a part-time vet tech, known for her love of animals. According to the article, she had died in a car accident just 3 weeks earlier. Marla's heart sank. Did she help you too, Scout?" she whispered. The dog looked up at her and gently wagged his tail. That night, Marla didn't take him home. She let him stay by the grave, curling up under the tree where he had kept his silent vigil for days. She stayed too, just a few feet away on a blanket. And in that still night air, a strange peace settled over her. Scout wasn't lost. He had simply returned to say goodbye to someone who had once saved him. Elsewhere, Earl was changing too. He'd stopped drinking entirely. He spent his days walking the property, not to shout or curse, but to clean. He cleared the mud pit, took down the rotting post, planted flowers along the back fence. He didn't know why. He just needed to. He started volunteering at the animal shelter in town. The first time he walked in, people stared, but he didn't flinch. "I want to help," he said. "Dogs. I used to have one. Hurt him bad. I want to make it right." They gave him a mop and a chance. Weeks passed. Scout continued to visit Sarah's grave every morning. Then he'd return to Marla's house at night. He was quieter now, older, wiser, but something inside him had healed, and perhaps something inside Earl had too. Then one morning, everything changed. Scout didn't get up. Marla called him gently. He didn't move. His breathing was shallow. His eyes were soft. The vet came quickly, examined him on the living room floor. "He's not in pain," she said, "but he's tired." Scout looked at Marla, then at the door. Then he gently wagged his tail, as if asking for one last ride. Marla knew exactly where he wanted to go. She drove him down the old road, the one he had once run away from, the road back to Earl's house. When she pulled up, Earl was sitting on the porch again, cleaner, thinner, sober. He stood when he saw her, and then he saw Scout. They stared at each other. No words. Scout stepped out of the car on trembling legs and walked to him. Earl fell to his knees. "I'm so sorry," he choked out. "I didn't deserve you. I never did." Scout leaned in, nuzzled his head into Earl's chest, and let out a breath. Long, final, peaceful. Earl held him for a long time. Marla watched with tears streaming down her face. The man who had once beaten this dog was now broken by his kindness. And Scout had finally said goodbye. Scout's body lay still in Earl's arms. The once mighty dog who had endured chains, fists, hunger, and heartbreak, had chosen to take his final breath in the embrace of the man who had once been his greatest tormentor. Earl didn't speak for a long time. He just held him, his arms shaking, his eyes wide open, as if trying to memorize every inch of Scout's face before it disappeared forever. Marla stood back, silent, allowing him the moment. This wasn't just an ending. It was a reckoning, a moment stitched with sorrow, regret, and something even deeper, redemption. They buried Scout in the yard, right where the old muddy chain had once staked him. Earl had cleared it months ago, planting flowers around a small tree sapling. Now that patch of land had a new purpose. Earl placed Scout's collar on a handmade wooden cross. He'd carved it himself, shaking hands and all. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Marla added something too. A photo of Scout as a pup, the first day she had brought him home. In that picture, his eyes were full of hope. Now they could rest. That evening, Marla sat with Earl on the porch. Neither of them said much, until Earl broke the silence. "I used to think love was earned," he muttered. "That dogs only cared if you fed him, kept him alive. But Scout, he loved me even when I gave him nothing but pain." Marla nodded, wiping her cheek. "He didn't come back to punish you. He came back to free you." Earl's voice cracked. "He did." Then, more quietly, "Why would he do that?" She looked at him and simply said, "Because he was better than us." Days passed, then weeks. Earl found himself walking the town more often, now sober for over 5 months. He didn't avoid people anymore. He looked them in the eye. He even joined a local support group, not because someone told him to, but because he wanted to. One morning, Earl walked into the town's animal shelter again. The receptionist smiled politely, but cautiously. "Here to volunteer?" He nodded, then added, "Also here to adopt." There was a pause. "You sure about that?" Earl's gaze didn't waver. "I'll never be that man again." Scout made sure of it. The shelter introduced him to several dogs. Most barked or cowered. But one, A small mutt with one ear missing and burned scars along his back just stared at him with calm, wary eyes. The shelter staff called him Bones. Bones didn't wag his tail. He didn't approach. He just sat, watching, measuring. Earl sat across from him. Didn't reach. Didn't speak. Just waited. After 10 minutes, Bones inched forward. Just a little. Then laid his chin on Earl's boot. Earl wept. Bones came home that night. He was different from Scout. Nervous, skittish, with old wounds that hadn't fully healed. But Earl was different too. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't drink. He let Bones set the pace. And slowly, piece by piece, the dog began to trust again. The first tail wag took 3 weeks. The first lick? Almost 2 months. But when it came, Earl cried again because it meant something far more valuable than words. Forgiveness. Marla kept visiting too. Sometimes with food, sometimes just to sit. She watched Earl change, day by day. She had once hated him. Now, she didn't know what to feel. "He's trying," she told her friend one afternoon. And somehow, I think Scout knew he would. In town, people began to notice the transformation. Rumors faded. Whispers turned into curiosity. And then one day, a local reporter reached out. "Is it true?" the woman asked. "You were the man who abused that dog and then changed?" Earl looked at her. "I was that man," he said. "I'm not proud, but if Scout could forgive me, maybe others can too." The story went viral. Not because of the abuse, but because of the redemption. The image of Scout's grave. The photo of Bones on Earl's porch. The quote they printed in bold letters. "He came back to die in my arms, to show me what love really is." Donations poured into the shelter. Adoption rates doubled. And people started calling it Scout's legacy. One evening, Earl took Bones on a walk to the cemetery where Sarah McCain was buried. They stood under the oak tree. "Scout came here a lot," Earl whispered, "to say goodbye to someone who helped him." He bent down and left a small carved wooden bone on her grave. "Thank you," he said, "for saving him, so he could save me." A soft breeze passed through the leaves. Bones wagged his tail. Earl smiled. For the first time in decades, it felt like peace. Back home that night, Earl sat on the porch with Bones curled at his feet. He looked at the stars, and for the first time in his life, whispered into the night, "Scout, I love you, boy." There was no bark, no rustle, but Earl could have sworn the wind carried something back. Something soft, something like a tail wagging in the dark. Earl never expected his life to carry meaning again. Not after everything he'd done. Not after everything he'd broken. But Scout's final act, returning just to die in his arms, had forced something open in him. A door he didn't know he had shut. Now, months after Scout's passing, Earl had become a fixture at the shelter. Cleaning kennels, feeding scared pups, speaking gently to the ones that barked and snapped out of fear. He understood them now, more than he ever had before, because he was them once. People had started calling Earl the Dog Whisperer. He hated the title. He wasn't gifted. He wasn't magical. He was just honest. He treated the dogs like they were old friends who had every right to be angry at the world, because some of them were. One Saturday morning, the shelter was packed. A group of teens were touring the facility as part of their volunteer orientation. One of the girls, maybe 16, had bright pink hair and heavy boots. She kept looking at Earl. "Is it true?" she asked suddenly. "You're the guy from the article? The one who used to hurt his dog?" The room went quiet. Earl paused in mid-sweep. He didn't flinch. Didn't smile either. "I am," he said, meeting her eyes. "That's the worst thing I've ever done. And the best thing I ever did was stop." The girl blinked. then said softly, "I used to hit my little brother." Her voice cracked. Earl nodded once. "Doesn't make you a monster. Makes you human. The real question is, what are you gonna do now?" She swallowed hard. I want to change." "Then you're in the right place," Earl said. "These dogs'll teach you how." Later that evening, Marla stopped by Earl's house. She found him sitting on the porch, Bones asleep beside him. She carried a small package. Inside was a photo. Scout, sleeping beside her when he was a puppy, before the abuse began. His paw was wrapped around her wrist. "I thought you should have this," she said, handing it over. Earl's hands trembled as he took the frame. He stared at it for a long time. "I don't deserve this." Marla shrugged. "None of us do. But love doesn't ask if you've earned it. It just shows up. Scout showed up for you. I think you can show up for him too." They sat in silence, the porch bathed in orange sunset light. Then Marla cleared her throat. "I need to tell you something." Earl looked up. "I'm moving." "What?" "Got a job offer, another vet clinic. They need someone full-time." Earl's face dropped, but he nodded slowly. "That's good. You deserve that." "It's in another state," she added. "Couple hours flight." Earl swallowed. "Guess I'll have to say goodbye again." She smiled, tears in her eyes. "Not goodbye. Just see you later." That night, Earl couldn't sleep. He walked into his backyard, sat beside Scout's grave, and spoke softly. "I think she saved me too, Scout. Just like you." The wind rustled the leaves gently. Earl placed the photo Marla had given him in a small sealed frame at the foot of the cross. "I'll keep the promise. I won't go back. Not ever." Bones came up behind him, pressing his nose against Earl's shoulder. The next morning, something strange happened. Bones refused to go outside for his morning walk. Instead, he barked, pacing in circles around Earl's boots. Then he darted toward the front door and growled. Low and alert, Earl followed him outside, and froze. Across the street, an old man had collapsed on the sidewalk. Bones sprinted ahead. Earl shouted for help and rushed to the man's side. He was barely conscious, clutching his chest. An ambulance arrived minutes later. The paramedics worked fast. "You saved him," one said to Earl as they loaded the man in. "If you hadn't come out when you did." Earl looked down at Bones, who stood still, alert, tail stiff. "Not me," he said. "Him." The story made local headlines. Rescue dog rescues again. This time, his new owner too. But Earl didn't care about the attention. He just watched Bones differently now. There was something in the dog, something eerily like Scout. Was it possible that dogs left behind more than memories? Could they pass down courage? Or maybe, just maybe, a little piece of their soul? Weeks passed. The shelter threw a fundraiser in Scout's honor. They called it the Forgiveness Gala. Earl stood on stage at the end of the night, microphone in hand. He stared at the crowd, dozens of faces, some familiar, some strangers. He took a breath. "I'm not going to pretend I deserve your applause. I'm not proud of who I was, but I'm damn proud of who Scout was." The room was silent. "I beat him, starved him, ignored him, but when he came back into my life, he didn't bark. He didn't bite. He laid at my feet and died in my arms." Gasps and sniffles echoed across the room. "Scout didn't just forgive me. He freed me." Earl's voice cracked. "And now, I get to spend the rest of my life paying that love forward. One dog at a time." The crowd stood. Applause thundered through the hall. Marla, watching from the side, wiped away tears. She would be leaving soon. But she knew Earl would be okay. He had Bones now. He had purpose. He had Scout in every step. That night, Earl went home and placed a new stone next to Scout's grave. It read, "Scout, the dog who taught me love," and just beneath it, "And Bones, the dog who helped me live it." As Earl turned to head back inside, he paused. The wind picked up again, like it always did when he spoke to Scout. He looked back at the graves and smiled. "I'm still listening," he whispered, then walked inside with Bones trailing close behind. Winter came early that year. The sky turned a pale gray by afternoon, and mornings felt like walking through cold breath. Earl wrapped his scarf tighter, tugged on his gloves, and whistled softly. Bones came trotting from the porch, tail wagging, eyes bright. "Ready?" Earl asked. Bones barked once. It had become their daily ritual. Long walks through the woods near the town's edge, where Scout used to run. But today, something felt different. Not wrong, just important. Like the day was waiting for something, or someone. As they walked, the trees whispered with frost. Earl glanced at Bones, who kept stopping and sniffing the air, ears perked. "You sense it too, don't you?" Bones let out a soft whine. They passed the old bridge, the one Earl had driven over for decades, always looking away from the valley below. He didn't look away now. He remembered Scout sitting there, that last night, staring at the moonlight like it meant something. Earl didn't understand it then. He thought it was just a dog being a dog. But maybe Scout was saying goodbye to more than him. Maybe he was passing the torch. Back home, there was a letter in the mailbox. From Marla. He hadn't heard from her since she moved to Oregon. Earl sat down with Bones curled at his feet and opened the envelope. Inside, a handwritten note. "Dear Earl, I hope this finds you well. I think of you often, especially when I see dogs come into the clinic, shaking, terrified, yet still trying to trust us. I remember Scout in every one of them. You told me once that you weren't sure if you'd ever be forgiven. But I think you already were. I saw it the night Scout came back to you, and I see it now in every photo the shelter posts, of you holding broken dogs like their treasure. Keep going. The world needs more men who've been shattered and put back together by love." Marla. Earl's hands trembled. He pressed the letter to his chest. Bones nudged his hand gently. That night something happened. Something no one could explain. Started with Bones. He woke Earl up at 2:47 a.m. Stood at the door. Barked once. Then again. And again. Urgent. Earl grabbed his coat and opened the door. Bones took off. Straight into the icy dark. Earl shouted and chased him. Heart pounding. They crossed the street, then the field behind the gas station into the woods. The same woods Scout had limped through that fateful night. Bones led him to a small clearing, and stopped. At the center was a girl, maybe 6 years old, shivering, wrapped in a too-thin jacket. She looked up with wide eyes, frozen in place. "Hey!" Earl called, heart racing. "Hey, sweetheart, are you okay?" She didn't answer. Bones crept toward her slowly, tail down, ears forward, then sat, and waited. The girl looked at the dog, then reached out. Bones stepped closer and licked her hand. She broke down sobbing. Earl rushed in, wrapping his coat around her. "How long have you been out here?" She buried her face into his shoulder. "Don't know. I got scared." He held her tight. "You're safe now." The police arrived minutes later. The girl had wandered from a nearby trailer park. Her parents had been frantic. She had run away after a shouting match. But if Bones hadn't found her, they didn't finish the sentence. They didn't need to. The whole town was talking about it by morning. Rescue dog saves child in freezing woods. But Earl didn't smile. He didn't feel like celebrating. Instead, he visited Scout's grave again that afternoon, placed a small wooden toy next to it, a carved dog bone with a heart in the center. "I think he's ready," he whispered. "I think he did it, Scout. He saved someone, like you saved me." The wind stirred, cold but gentle. Days passed. Bones became a legend. The mayor invited Earl to speak at a community event. Earl declined. Instead, he wrote something, which the mayor read aloud at the ceremony. "I once broke a dog who never broke me back. And when I saw the way he left this world with quiet grace, I knew I owed him my life. Bones is not just my second chance. He's the echo of every moment I wasted, and every moment I've been given since. Scout taught me how to be a man. Bones taught me how to be one who mattered." Asterisk. The crowd fell silent. Even the mayor wiped away tears. The story spread beyond the town. People from other states wrote letters. Some said they had started volunteering at shelters. Some said they forgave people they hadn't spoken to in years. Some said they just wanted to believe in goodness again. And somehow, this one scarred dog had reminded them it was possible. Months later, on a quiet Sunday, Bones passed away, peacefully, in his sleep, curled up at Earl's feet. The vet said it was likely a heart condition no one saw coming. Earl buried him beside Scout, and for a long time he said nothing, did nothing, just sat on the porch, listening. Then one day he stood up, went back to the shelter. "Got room for an old man and a little bit more healing?" he asked. The staff smiled through tears. "There's a dog that just came in," someone said. "Scared. Won't let anyone touch him." Earl nodded. "Then we've met." He walked into the kennel, knelt down, didn't speak, didn't move, just waited. After a while, a trembling paw reached through the bars and touched his boot. Earl smiled. Scout taught him love. Bones taught him how to use it. Now it was Earl's turn. Not to be forgiven anymore, but to be the one who forgives. And maybe, just maybe, to teach another soul that love, even after everything, was still possible. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Stories like this remind us that even the most broken souls can find redemption, and that sometimes the love of a dog is all it takes to change a life. Drop a comment below if you believe in second chances, and if you've ever been saved by a four-legged friend. Paw Prints, Red Heart.